Hi everyone, my name is Kason Creighton and today I'll be discussing rodeo, whether it's a sport or animal cruelty. The sport of rodeo that we all know didn't exist until the late 1800s, but the roots of rodeo can be traced back to the Spanish that came to California and settled down to become cattle ranchers. The definition of rodeo comes from the Spanish word rodeor, which also means go around. The difference in Spanish rodeos and rodeos that go on today is that Spanish rodeos were predominantly focused on style and form, whereas today's rodeos are mostly focused on speed. Another thing that helped influence the rodeo that we have today is Wild West shows. Wild West shows started in the late 1800s, where they traveled across eastern states for about 50 years. They competed and they performed mostly, and put on shows all across. And in about the early 1900s, the Wild West shows started to travel overseas, especially to England, Africa, and later to Belgium, where the world's first World Fair took place. The main difference between Wild West shows and modern-day rodeos is that Wild West shows paid cowboy actors to perform, and rodeo competitors that compete today pay entry fees in order to compete to win prizes and money. The early rodeos started somewhere in the 1860s, some say 1840s, but many claim that the first was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, some say Deer Trail, Colorado, and others say Pecos, Texas. However, there is no evidence as to where it was actually at. Every early rodeo varied in style and the events that took place, but we do know they were mostly free to the public. One of today's most famous rodeos still is the Prescott Rodeo in Prescott, Arizona. This rodeo was first held July 4th, 1888, and it would be the rodeo that helped shape rodeo as a whole. The events included bronc riding, steer roping, and cow pony races. In 1889, the steer riding competition was held, and later, the calf roping, which is one of today's most famous events in rodeo, was added in 1917. There are very many reasons why the sport of rodeo is important. The first one is for promoting youth education. Promoting youth education is something very important to the rodeo community. We strive to teach children the correct way to care for animals, and we try to make rodeo an outlet for kids to get a better education. The Star of Texas Fair and Rodeo is a fast-growing charity in the rodeo world. The organization is in Austin and awards more than $400,000 every year in college scholarships. It also creates an additional $1.5 million that supports the youth that show livestock at the show. This is a 15-night event held in Austin each year. Another mission of rodeo is to preserve the Western heritage. So many cowboys and cowgirls are proud of our background and where we came from, and it's important to us that we share that with the individuals who attend rodeo and are just there to spectate. We believe that it's important that we teach families how to properly raise and feed animals, and in addition to this, we want to teach that the Western heritage is about working hard and gaining valuable hands-on experience. There is a book called Rodeo Austin, Blue Ribbons, Buckin' Broncs, and Big Dreams by Liz Carmack and Bucky Lamb. This book does a phenomenal job explaining the importance of their rodeo, but it also sums up the importance of all other rodeos in existence. Finally, another reason is diversifying rodeo. Rodeo has often been thought of as the white male sport, and that is no longer the case. There are many women who are stepping up in the rodeo world, making a name for themselves, and we think it's awesome. In addition to this, rodeo is attracting men and women of different backgrounds, races, ethnicities, and we love it. The sport of rodeo is so welcoming to all because it's not about gender, the color of skin, or the language you speak. It's about the shared belief that rodeo is the greatest sport, and it's also about the traditions that stand with rodeo. There is a book that I quoted in my references. It's talking about a rodeo cowgirl named Lucille Mulhall, and it was about an impressive ride that caught the attention of the current president, Theodore Roosevelt. He was so impressed with her that he declared her the nation's cowgirl, and that really stapled the name cowgirl at the time. Rodeo today can be very rewarding. Just like any job, the harder you work, the more you practice, the more money you can make. Of course, to rodeo cowgirls and cowboys, it's not about the money, it's about the experience. But if you're rodeoing as a career, it is definitely good to know how much you're making. So, as far as payouts and the salaries that come with rodeo, there are two examples I want to quote. There's the National Finals Rodeo. That rodeo pays off a total of $10 million annually. And then the American, which is known as the rodeo that pays out in one day the most amount of money, the world's richest one-day rodeo, pays out $2.5 million annually. Just to put it into perspective, if you win one round at the National Finals Rodeo, you win about $30,000. If you win the average for the 10 rounds combined, you win nearly $68,000. So there's pretty good money if you can become a pro at it and go. Along with the money that you win, you have to spend a great amount of expenses in order to be successful. So there is, of course, the livestock, which consists of the horses and the practice stock that you use to get better. Horses that you ride can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000. They can be pretty pricey. There are instances where cowboys and cowgirls train and raise their own horses, and they have still done a phenomenal job and made a name for themselves, but it's more likely that they go out and buy an expensive horse. The entry fees that cowboys and cowgirls have to pay just to be able to rodeo. Typically, they're around $100 to $500 depending on the size of the rodeo, but generally they go to about 60 to 100 rodeos per year. So if you think 100 rodeos at about an average of $300 per rodeo just to enter, not even guaranteed to win, the prices will add up. In addition to this, there's fuel, vehicles, trailers, and airfare. Most cowboys and cowgirls travel by pickup and trailer because they have a trailer that they can stay the night in. Thinking about a pickup that's big, that doesn't get very much gas mileage, on the top of that having to pull a large trailer full of livestock, that really lowers your fuel mileage range, so it's going to cost you more to travel. In addition to this, a lot of cowboys and cowgirls will fly from rodeo to rodeo if they're back-to-back, and that can really add up because not only are they paying for airfare, they are paying to rent somebody's horse to ride because they generally can't get their horse flown. So there are a lot of costs that do come with rodeo, but you can't win money without spending a little money, and cowboys and cowgirls are okay with that. Anyways, there is a tremendous amount of dedication that is involved with rodeo. The number one thing that cowboys and cowgirls will always put first is their livestock. You can't get a job done without your partner, and so it's important that cowboys and cowgirls take the best of care of their horses and their livestock. Generally, cowboys will make sure their horses are fed before they are, make sure they're warm and cool when the temperatures are changing. They will take their animals to the veterinarian before they will ever see a doctor for themselves, and they will spend more money on equipment and gear for their horses than they could ever imagine for themselves. Taking care of their horses has always been something that cowboys and cowgirls have grown up doing, and it's something that they will never stop doing. It's just like a little boy or girl as a child taking care of their first pet. You learn the importance of them and you value them because they are your partner and they are your help. Dedication is also practice. Practice makes perfect. You have to practice hard if you want to be the best. One other thing that involves a tremendous amount of dedication is the time away from home. If you are just rodeoing as a hobby, it's okay. You're only going to be gone for a little bit of time. You don't have to spend a tremendous amount of time away from home. But if you rodeo as a career, it does. If you have a family that's not able to travel everywhere with you, you have to sacrifice time spent with them in order to rodeo and make a living at it. Along with the topic of rodeo, there are often many people that bring up animal cruelty. There are such groups such as PETA, the Animal Legal Defense, and the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, who are always attacking the sport of rodeo and its competitors. I am not surprised when I go to the PETA website and search up rodeo. There are many articles talking about the harsh treatment of animals in rodeo, the technology that's used to torture animals in rodeo, and I wasn't surprised by what I saw, but I do want to touch on something. I did see an article that talked about the tools of torment that were used for rodeo, which they were talking about a hot shot. They claimed that the hot shot does burn holes in an animal and it causes a tremendous amount of pain, but I want to shed a little bit of light on the subject. I have grown up around these tools. I'm a cattle rancher. They are used often in our ranching environment, and they're used in rodeo. The hot shot is a tool that sends very low current electric shock to the cattle by poking them with a small prod. PETA claims that it brings tremendous amount of pain to the animals. It's been heavily researched, and it's a piece of technology that would not be put out on the market if it did harm the animals in such a way that was causing tremendous pain or distress to them. So I'm going to have to disagree with PETA there. People in PETA think that rodeo is cruel because it, quote unquote, displays manipulative human dominance over animals. It also claims that aggressive behavior is taught to animals, and like I stated earlier, that tools of torment are being used. I realize that PETA might not be the most credible source, but I thought it was important to touch on what they thought of it as well. The PRCA has a view on what everyone is saying about rodeo and animal cruelty, and I do think they do a phenomenal job combating the negative energy and the negative comments that they're constantly getting. The PRCA says that Humane Society fabricates facts and uses attacks on rodeo for fundraising. I don't know that that's a fact or not, but it's a little suspicious. Mrs. Greer, who was the PRCA's animal welfare coordinator, says, "The way we respond to those charges is the truth. We take all claims of animal cruelty seriously. It's in our best interest to make sure that none of the stock are being harmed." She also discusses a study where 34,000 bulls, horses, and calves were all injured in rodeos through the year, and after the season, they only documented 16 injuries. I could see why PETA gets a little upset over those stats, because on their case, it's not looking good for them. The stats from this, I'm sure, were shocking, but it's inevitable that animals and humans will get hurt in anything they do, and I believe that accusing rodeo of causing it is incredibly wrong. Finally, there's rodeo and ethics. The question of is rodeo ethical is always being brought up, but there's one thing that strikes me. Are animal rights groups that are protesting rodeo behaving in an ethical manner? I came across an article that actually did occur in Australia, but it was such a great article I thought I would share it. There were activists in Australia that were targeting a Tasmanian rodeo by defacing advertisements all around town. They were placing stickers over the advertisements saying rodeo canceled due to animal cruelty. In my opinion, this was unethical behavior by this group. Sure, there are many groups that do protest in a respectful and ethical manner, but in my opinion, that is very rare. Whether rodeo is ethical or not is up to you. I believe that it is, but that's my opinion. I have inserted a quote from an article that I read that seems to be against rodeo, and I was very impressed by the author of this article, and I have a lot of respect for this man, even though he doesn't seem to be in favor of rodeo. And I want to leave you with this quote. He says, "But first, rodeo people must be willing to recollect their moral concerns for animals, and critics of rodeo must be willing to acknowledge that moral concern rather than dismissing rodeo people as a bunch of sadistic, redneck, uncaring, moral troglodytes. Again, rodeo people must be willing to acknowledge the rational moral basics of social ethical concern for animals, even among urban animal advocates, while urban critiques must realize the strong symbolic cultural dimensions of rodeo and respect the role it plays in people's minds." here are the resources I used. And I just want to thank you all for listening, and I hope this video was useful and brought a little bit of insight and made you think about rodeo and the ethics behind it and whether it is a sport or animal cruelty. Thank you guys all for listening.